Thank you, Graham. It's extremely interesting to go through the reality of this understanding between governance and the independence of the biobanks themselves as responsible entities, and also to remind us, because your cloning question does keep coming up, no matter where you go in public settings to talk about biobanking, that hypothetical, what if one day somehow someone does something, is an unethical trump card. So you can't make policy based on those kinds of open-ended questions. It's a great pleasure then to welcome our last speaker in this session, Professor Brownsword, and he will take us forward to the challenges facing the Governing Council.
Sorry, I'll just... oh, there we are. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks very much. So my time with the EGC is basically the last 4 years. And when I took up the reins as chair of the EGC, I came to it as a complete novice. I had not been a previous member of the council, and I wouldn't say I was a kind of mainstream member of the bioethics community either. So it was a steep learning curve. But one of the things that really stuck in my mind from the great bundle of reading that Adrian gave me to familiarise myself with the history of the EGC was this phrase, a critical friend, which seemed to have crystallised from, particularly from Graham's time. It was not about barking dogs so much or biting dogs, it was about critical friends. And was that going to be an easier ride? And my prior experience of being a critical friend with another university, where I wasn't their critical friend, was pretty friendly and not overly critical. But my sense was that, you know, the danger here was, on the one side, yeah, you can be too friendly and criticism becomes muted, and that's neither barking nor biting. On the other hand, if you become overcritical, then there are problems about the friendship. So the tension within the critical friendship is one that I think is present and has to be constantly negotiated day by day, week by week in our dealings with not only UK Biobank, but of course with the funders, who are also an important node in this governance triangle. The funders, UK Biobank and the EGC, play out this particular governance drama. So, not the right one. Sorry, I'm just trying to... Oh, there we are. Beg your pardon. Am I pressing the wrong key? Oh, it's the down arrow. I beg your pardon. Okay, sorry. Okay. Well, okay. So the outline is that I'll just capture a couple of what I think were the headline issues in the last 4 years for us. The second thing, some remarks about how do you actually operate as a critical friend, bearing in mind what I was just saying in those introductory remarks about the tension between criticism and friendship. And of course, again, I mean, it's easy to take a minor criticism on board. If you've got a draft from Biobank and you say, I think that you should start this sentence with however rather than but, I mean, it's easy enough to take that on board. But if if your however is a pretty fundamental but, then that's another matter altogether. So how do you negotiate that? Thirdly, what should we on the EGC be focusing on? How reactive should we be? How proactive should we be? And fourthly, what next? Okay, so it's the down arrow I'm looking for. Gosh. I was working on. No, that's not the right one, is it? I'm sorry about this. Okay. Oh. Yeah. Are you negotiating it for me? No. No, okay. Okay, thanks very much. Okay. Sorry to be... yeah, okay. So the two really headline issues in the last 4 years have been, first of all, finalising the access process. When I took over as chair of the EGC, the details of the access process were still being finalised. And it had been quite a difficult process, I think, in Graham's final year, particularly as, again, the devil was in the detail, and exactly how was the access process to be developed. I mean, what was it going to look like? The main stream for applications was clearly going to be through UK Biobank. It was always going to adjudicate applications, but there was going to be some horizontal oversight by the EGC, and exactly what would that oversight amount to? How hands-on was it going to be? How would that work? That was all a crucial question about what our oversight role should be in the detail, and what it required, particularly for us to make sure that we were discharging our responsibilities to participants. And the other headline issues have concerned the many enhancements that have taken place at UK Biobank in this 4-year period. Mike has already talked through the work on biomarkers, on genotyping, and the work that's now being piloted on the various imaging modalities. These are questions that have again brought to the surface issues about what findings you return to participants. I'm not sure whether in the earlier discussion, actually, there was a slight misunderstanding about what is being fed back on the imaging pilot and how that sits with the general no feedback policy. I think the model in the imaging pilot is that where findings are made during the course of collecting the images, then where they are serious findings, they will be returned to participants. But although at this stage there is no downstream research use being made of the images, if there were downstream use being made, then findings at that point would not be returned, and that would be coherent with the general no feedback policy. No doubt there'll be a great deal more about trying to fine-tune our understanding of this when we get to the feedback session. But these have been the two headline issues for us these last 4 years, and this is where we've been trying to develop our sense of critical friendship. Thanks very much. So I think that in these bullet points, much of what I'm saying here is echoing what Graham just said. That first of all, it's for UK Biobank to adopt principles and practices that it is prepared to defend as ethically sound. Jeremy Paxman's retired from Newsnight, but I kept saying in conversations, it's for UK Biobank to defend, and could it defend under the kind of cross-examination that someone like Jeremy Paxman would give you? Could you, are you so confident about this that you could, because you really do need to be. And our role on the EGC is to alert Biobank to the kind of issues that are relevant to their considerations. But in the end, it's for them to make the decision. Now, if I could just say something as a lawyer that perhaps won't make huge sense to many people here, but let me just say it nevertheless. In the post-war period, in the late 1940s, a huge decision was made in English administrative law in the area of judicial review. There was a challenge to a decision that had been made by a local authority in the Midlands about the Sunday opening of cinemas in its particular area. It's called the Wednesbury case. And this decision was being challenged as being unreasonable, which was a head to challenge a decision made by a public body. And the argument was that the particular decision they made was unreasonable. And many people would think that the Wednesbury cinema decision was unreasonable, the decision made by the local authority. But the Court of Appeal stood off this and said, we're not going to get involved in making our own decisions about what is and isn't reasonable. That's a huge, as it were, margin of appreciation here. Here's a huge spectrum of reasonableness. And provided these public bodies are sitting somewhere within the spectrum of reasonableness, we're not going to interfere. We're only going to interfere with this and declare this ultra vires or unreasonable if it is so unreasonable, so unreasonable that no reasonable person could have possibly reached this decision. And public lawyers in England talk about this as the lunatic test, or effectively as saying, this would have to be crazy to do this, okay? And we know that in bioethics and biobanking, so many of the decisions that have to be made by UK Biobank are deeply controversial and difficult and contested decisions, where, for example, feedback, for example, there is a huge spectrum of opinions. Now, it may be, I'm not sure that it is, but it may be that on the Ethics and Governance Council, there is a consensus view about the right approach to take to feedback. I don't really know whether we do have a particular view on that. I suspect that each person on the council has his or her own take on that question. But anyway, whatever the position, our role, as I see it, is to keep talking to Biobank about whatever issues there are and say, look, in the end, you have to make your decision. If we think it is Wednesbury unreasonable, as it were, If we were to think it's meant to be unreasonable, then no doubt we would talk to the funders about it and say, we think Biobank are doing something crazy here. But the nuclear option still wouldn't quite be in sight unless it was unbelievably crazy, just sort of outrageous. And in the same way, the second bullet point is that we aspire for Biobank to internalise the ethical questions. It's not the most natural question for Biobank to have on its agenda. I mean, there are many, many, many practical problems that Biobank has to be addressing. Enrolling participants, getting the systems up and running. But when I first went to Cheadle, soon after I took over as chair of the EGC, and Tim Peakman showed me around the facility at Cheadle, I couldn't fail to be impressed at the care and attention, the pride that Tim took in the systems at Cheadle. How they managed to get particularly the bloods and whatnot from the samples from the collection centres to Cheadle with minimum risk of them being degraded, all this sort of thing, a huge pride in that. And in the same way, on the EGC, we would aspire for Biobank to take ethics as seriously in just the same way. But as time's gone on, it's become clear that we do need to have some flexibility about the way in which we enter into dialogues with Biobank. We have our quarterly set-piece council meetings usually in this building, where Rory comes along and reports, and other people from UK Biobank come along from time to time to give us reports on communications. For example, Andrew Treherne comes along. Mike came along when he took over as chair of the board, just to introduce himself. So we get reports from UK Biobank at these quarterly meetings, and we have conversations at these quarterly council meetings. But these aren't always the ideal arenas or fora for critical friends to sit down and actually really address a difficult issue. And it seems to me that, although it's taken a long time for the penny to drop, this certainly isn't command and control governance. It's certainly not top-down governance. It is, as Graham says, a kind of bottom-up self-governance scheme involving UK Biobank, ourselves, the EGC, the funders. Martin Richards was just saying to me before we got going today that at the ISAB, in a sense, is part of this governance framework too, because ISAB discussions do go beyond the science. These are all parts of the pressures and impulses that are features of this particular governance network. And we all share a common aspiration for the success of UK Biobank. We want to do the best of its type in the world, but we want it to be best for the science, best technically, but also best ethically. If I could just move on to the next one. And what should we be focusing on? Well, everybody says that UK Biobank is a Rolls-Royce operation, but at least in the EGC, we have limited resources. I wouldn't say we run on a shoestring. That would be an exaggeration. But we're very fortunate in many respects. But, I mean, it's not as though we are sitting on, a treasure chest of funding. Okay. And we have limited numbers, too. Usually there are about a dozen people on the council. And that might seem more than adequate, but we are quite stretched. We are stretched. There's issues about recontact, about feedback, whatever it might be, about linkage come up. We develop subgroups to work on these particular issues. It's a big drain on members' time. And it seems to me that, looking forward a bit, we need to be focusing on those issues of ethics and governance that really are novel and significant, strategically important. And there are issues like that where we can dedicate our time and attention to those particular issues. But of course, we have to react, and particularly the enhancement developments of Biobank have given occasion for us to react to many issues there, and in particular the development of the incidental findings protocol for the imaging pilot. We have also had to respond to issues arising in relation to applications that envisage recontacting participants. The ethics and governance framework singles out recontact as the one issue where the EGC does have to be consulted. And as luck would have it, one of the very first applications that came in when the resource was opened, within the first 3 months or so, was an application for recontact. And it seemed to me that, and members on the council, that we could, of course, advise on that particular application. But what we really needed here was some sort of framework within which decisions about recontact should be made. So at the same time that we were trying to give advice on this first application that had a recontact aspect to it, we were also beginning to sketch, and it was very much on the back of an envelope, we're beginning to sketch what we think were the guiding principles for recontact. The participants should not be over recontacted. You know, that I think Mike said that there's a great deal of concern at UK Biobank that participants won't be overused, that there won't be fatigue, as it were, through over recontact. But again, in the end, what happened there was that having said there needs to be a recontact framework, it was then for UK Biobank with our prompting to develop the recontact guidelines. And now where recontact issues arise, then of course the question for the EGC is whether this is a question that can be settled within those guidelines. I mean, the guidelines are there. Now it's for Biobank, having articulated its own guidelines, to follow them and apply them. There are of course, possibilities of the EGC acting proactively, limited opportunities, but during my time, the most important thing that we have proactively, most important question we proactively put on the agenda has been about feedback. This was not something the funders asked us to do. It was not something Biobank asked us to do, but we felt that with the sense the climate of opinion in the ethical community was shifting in relation to these feedback issues. The landscape was changing. We needed to take stock of what was going on there. So we visited people in Framingham, we visited Alsbach. We tried to talk to people about what their feedback policies were, just so that we were better informed. And I think that did help us then when we were discussing particularly the incidental findings protocol for the imaging study with Biobank. That helped us have a much clearer view about what was and wasn't practicable and desirable in principle in relation to feedback. I mean, I guess that a lot of work went into that to take us to the position of recognizing that this is a very difficult question and a complex question that takes some unraveling, and that, again, in Wednesbury style, there are a number of positions which are acceptable on the spectrum. The important thing is that you declare your position clearly, as Biobank tries to do. You stand up and defend it. You make sure that participants understand what the deal is, what they will be told, what they won't be told. And okay, people might disagree with you, but if they disagree, then they don't have to take part on those terms. They don't have to take part, I should say. And moving on to the final question of what's next for the EGC. Well, I'm sure that there will be a continuing struggle to try to come to terms with what critical friendship really means. But as I say, I think this is something that has to be negotiated day by day. But in the immediate future, we come up to our quinquennial review. The EGC only exists because principally the Wellcome Trust and the Medical Research Council fund it. And of course, our brief, our remit, is given by the funders. So the funders are reviewing our activities over the last 5 years, and who knows what the outcome of that will be. But there are important recommendations made by review panels. Graham mentioned that during his time, the EGC tried very hard to engage with the public, but in 2010, that particular review 5 years ago recommended that it wasn't the EGC's role really to engage with the public in that way, and there was a very clear direction there to pull back on that. So in my time, there hasn't been the same kind of engagement with the public, and that's obviously something for us to raise again in our submission to the funders in this upcoming review. We continue, of course, to do our best to hold Biobank to account relative to the ethics and governance framework. I have to say that I think that in my dealings with Biobank, they are extremely attentive to what the ethics and governance framework said. Many conversations, come down to, well, this is what the ethics and governance framework says. And of course, that's designed to safeguard the interests of participants. That's what they've signed up on. And of course, the public more generally. We expect to work with Biobank on new questions of ethics and governance. The future is rapidly changing scene. And as I indicated in my introductory remarks at the beginning of today, this conference is one event that I hope will allow us to talk somewhat about the possibility of the EGC adopting a more outward-facing role, sharing our experience of ethics and governance in the context of big biobanking. So thanks very much.